I bet you guys thought I was just gonna leave you hanging, huh? There's no way I can talk about Just Frieren and not talk about the other GOAT of this anime season. Woo! I love this show so much. Let's go! Apothecary Diaries is admittedly a bit out of my wheelhouse. Growing up, I've always loved shonen battle series with a very heavy emphasis on action and excitement, so you can only imagine the kind of whiplash something like Apothecary Diaries would give me. This show's popularity really wasn't something I could ignore though. Anywhere you look, people are praising this show left and right, and after having watched it, I can't really say that its praise is unwarranted. For those who don't know, Apothecary Diaries originally began as Apothecary's Monologue, a web novel written by author Natsu Hyuga. The novel was able to gain enough traction online that it would eventually be published as an official light novel, the Apothecary Diaries. Now, there isn't a lot about Natsu Hyuga online, and I think that's just par for the course for a lot of Japanese authors nowadays. But what I found incredibly interesting about her is that Apothecary Diaries is not only her biggest work, but her earliest. The original web novel was posted in 2011, with the official light novel coming 3 years later in 2014. And she's even been involved with the series' official manga adaptation that was released in 2017. She's worked on other things in between these projects, namely King of Tonoliko, Isekai Weapon Dealers, and her latest work, Lies Don't Work for a Saint. But given how much work she's done on Apothecary Diaries throughout the years, it's probably occupied her mind for a good portion of her career. And given just how well her first work did do, it's probably also safe to say it occupied her mind for a good amount of time before she even started working on it. I wouldn't really be surprised because some of the details in the story are so intricate that it feels like they would have had to have been fleshed out for a while. And I'm so happy to say that this same detail-oriented philosophy was applied to the anime as well. Director Norihiro Naganuma and the teams over at Toho Animation and OLM really outdid themselves in this department. And it's apparent just by looking at the anime itself. Apothecary Diaries is set in a fictional country heavily inspired by Imperial China during the Tang Dynasty. And I'm sorry for the amount of gushing you're about to hear from me right now, but the production design for this anime is it's insane. Just look at the amount of detail in this shot alone. The fact that people can draw this is just, it's mind-boggling. Then you keep watching and how? It feels like every possible intricacy was taken into account when designing every environment in this show. And this level of detail isn't even exclusive to just these incredibly grand environments. Simple and humble areas have been given the same level of detail as well. You can tell that the designers really went all out when planning this anime. One of the biggest compliments that I think I can give to the world that's been created here is that it feels real and massive, yet the story, at least so far, hasn't really even left the main Imperial Palace and the few areas that surround it. And while the level of detail shown in designing the world is certainly a key player in this, what also helps is the story that takes place within it. Apothecary Diaries follows a young girl named Maomao, who, as you can imagine, is an apothecary. She works with her father gathering herbs and creating various medicines and poisons, something that they're both incredibly passionate about. Her simple life takes a massive shift, however, when she's kidnapped by bandits and sold into labor to the Imperial Palace. From here, she works within the palace walls as a simple servant, and this is such a brilliant way to start the story. For one, it tells us immediately who Maomao is and gives us a relatable character to see and experience the complexities of the Imperial Palace through. Along with this, it also tells us something about the world Maomao lives in, specifically how someone like her is viewed in the society that she lives in. And things only develop from here. I'm not going to get too far into the intricacies of how the palace works, that'll take all day, but what you need to know is that early on, Maomao specifically works in the rear palace where the Emperor's 4 concubines live. You know, the women that he makes babies with. However, things begin to go awry when a mysterious disease begins to befall concubines Liwa and Gyokyu's newborn children. Naturally, rumors of a dark curse overtaking the palace begin to arise. However, Maomao, using her medical knowledge, is able to deduct the cause for this sudden ailment. And it's with this occurrence that the anime is able to immediately establish to you why it's so fun to watch. Basically, Maomao is Batman! From here, Maomao only finds herself entangled further into the mysteries, strange occurrences, and conspiracies within the Imperial walls, and has to use her knowledge as an apothecary as well as deductive reasoning to explain the logic behind these occurrences. It should be clarified that mystery doesn't make something automatically interesting. A mystery needs to have nuance to it, and this also goes for how the mystery is eventually solved. Thankfully, Apothecary Diaries delivers this in spades. Something I adore about the show is that it fully takes advantage of the time period it's set in. Phones, computers, and guns don't exist in this world, meaning that the characters don't have these resources to fall back on when they're either solving mysteries or conducting crimes. Often they have to use more subtle and intricate means to carry out their actions. One of the main reasons I always get excited to watch a new episode of Apothecary Diaries is because I feel like I learn something new with every episode. For example, using nothing but salt as a method to kill someone. It's so simple, but at the same time, I never would have thought of that. Watching Maomao deduct the logic behind an anomaly is incredibly entertaining, but what truly makes it rewarding is the way she connects the dots between all of these different occurrences, culminating into a greater conspiracy that takes up the arc for the portion of that story. Characters and events intertwine in a way that we as the audience are right there with Maomao, putting the pieces of the puzzle together over the course of the show's runtime. That being said, this does garner a small nitpick from me. The story becomes pretty involved with several different characters and events, and any significant gap of time between episodes is probably going to make it that much tougher to keep track of the different elements at play. Despite this, I think even someone who's slightly lost can still find a lot of enjoyment in this show, and that's because of the main character, Maomao herself. One of the biggest praises I see people give Apothecary Diaries is how well-rounded and entertaining Maomao is as a character. I've often seen people cite Maomao as one of the best female characters they've ever seen in an anime. I think in some popular media, there's certain instances where the idea of a character being a female envelops the process of the character's entire conception. In some instances, the character's femininity becomes the defining trait, whereas in others, their main point is to subvert this trait. Obviously, both of these are vastly different from each other, and I'm not even saying either of these are bad, but it's clear that gender is a large factor in defining these two types of characters, whether they're leaning into it or completely subverting it. Maomao is different in that it feels like her gender isn't the main motivating factor for her conception. Obviously, a character's gender shouldn't be ignored since it very much will play a big role in their experiences and history, but it also doesn't necessarily have to be the main subject when writing a character. Women are just people, so obviously when a female character is simply written as a person, they're just going to feel that much more real. Like, you want to know my favorite thing about Maomao? She's weird! She has a tremendous love for her work, and this love bleeds through a lot of her personality quirks and motivations. Anytime she sees a bed of herbs, she immediately starts to pick them without question. Most of the time, she can't stand interacting with Master Jinshi, but when he offers her some rare ingredients, she starts flying off the walls. She loves the taste of poison and the effect it has on her body, and a lot of times she'll test her new concoctions on herself, much to the disgust of those around her. You could say that she's socially awkward, but at the same time, I really wouldn't. It's clear that her work as an apothecary has led to her looking at many situations through an analytical lens. And this includes how she interacts with others. Anytime she's talking to other people, it feels like she's trying to get a good grasp on who that person is. And often she's able to use these analytical skills to influence her next move. In a lot of ways, she's so socially aware that she's able to take advantage of it. And I I love this. When I used to go to college, there was a lot of time dedicated to just sitting around and waiting for your next class to begin. During this time, I found myself talking to a lot of other students, specifically strangers that I didn't even know. And I always found it incredibly interesting how quickly they would start gushing to me about something that they were passionate about. And watching Apothecary Diaries, Maomao felt like one of these strangers. She felt like someone I had just met at college one day by chance. And that just made her feel all the more real to me. And I think this is what I love the most. Not only about Maomao's character, but Apothecary Diaries in general. It's that Maomao just feels like an ordinary person. Nowadays, I find myself becoming disillusioned with the world that I live in. As a society, we tend to place so much emphasis on those with status, power, and wealth. And I don't think there's anything wrong with appreciating people with these things or even admiring them, but I do think that there's something wrong when people who have status are considered to intrinsically have more value than, well, just your normal average Joe. And to me, this is what Maomao represents. She's constantly surrounded by people whose status in society completely dwarves hers. They make infinitely more money than her and tend to stand out distinctly. Meanwhile, it feels like Maomao just gets lost in the crowd like any other normal person. But this is why I love her so much. One of my takeaways from this show is that Maomao embraces her ordinary nature. It's not something that she tries to shed and abandon, rather cling to. And as I've gotten older, I think I understand this mindset. To be ordinary is to be free in a way. To be able to just live by your own standards and ideals and not to have any kind of expectation thrusted onto you by others. You can just be you. And when Maomao is just being herself, she has the biggest impact on everyone around her. And I think that that's beautiful. The notion that within the ordinary lies the extraordinary.